Chapter 1. Where there's a will, there's a way. This proverb originates back in the 17th century and was first written down in 1640 by a writer named George Herbert in his work, Jacula, Prudentism. To him that will, ways are not wanting. In the course of time, the proverb kept on being altered, and by 1820, it was changed to its present version. Where there's a will, there's a way. The proverb basically means that if one deeply desires to do something, he will find a way to do it, no matter what hindrances are placed in his way. Know what you want. Knowing what one wants and having a burning desire to attain it is, of course, a prerequisite. You may say, well, that's actually obvious, but is it? Studies show that almost everyone knows what they don't want, but only 20% of people surveyed know what they do want. In other words, most people can tell you immediately what they don't want, but if you were to ask them what they want, only a minority would be able to tell you. Your self-discipline and management skills will not help you much if you don't know what you want. Honestly, if you don't know where you are going, then it doesn't matter which route you take or how fast you drive. Self-discipline and time management are very important, but only after the direction has been set. Motivational speaker Zig Ziglar once said, "If you aim at nothing, you will hit it all the time." In my personal experience, writing down what you want makes a big difference. Writing down your goal does not guarantee that you will act on it, but because it is a neuromuscular activity, it forces you to think deeply and hence increases the chances that you will follow up on it. A study at a college in the United States once confirmed this. A total of 20 students took part in the study. They were all urged to set goals that they wanted to achieve in a period of 5 years. Half of this group was asked not only to set goals, but to write them down. The results revealed that only 20% of those who did not write down their goals achieved their goals, and in comparison, 80% of those who were asked to write it down achieved their desired goals. I personally also realize that it is important to be specific and positive while writing down the goals. For example, instead of writing, "I don't want to be always late," it's better to write, "I am always going to be punctual." Or, instead of writing, "I don't want to be unhealthy," it's better to write, "I want to live a healthy life, eating healthy foods, and working out 3 times a week." Why is this important? Well, the first statement in both examples focuses on what you don't want. If you write, "I don't want to be always late," your focus is on what you don't want, that is, being late. Studies show that the brain tends to ignore the word "don't" in this statement and focuses on the late. Russian novelist Fyodor Dostoevsky, best known for his book Crime After Punishment, while on a trip to Western Europe in 1863 wrote, "Try to pose for yourself this task, not to think of a polar bear, and you will see the cursed thing come to mind every minute." Daniel Wegner, a psychology professor at Harvard University and founding father of thought suppression research, was intrigued by this statement and decided to carry out an experiment to verify if it held any water. There are 2 groups participating in the experiment. The first group was given a tape recorder and asked to record their stream of thoughts in a 5-minute time period without thinking of a white bear. But if a white bear came to their mind, they were to ring a bell. In the second part of the experiment, they were told not to suppress the thought of the white bear. As in the first part, they were to ring a bell when the thought came to mind. The second group was given reverse orders. In the first 5 minutes, they were told to think about the white bear and in the last 5 minutes not to think about the white bear. The results confirm Dostoevsky's theory. The first group that had been instructed to first suppress and then express the thought ended up thinking much more about the white bear than the second group that had been instructed to express and then suppress the same thought. The reason, simply put, is that when we try to suppress a thought, our brain starts to scan for the very thing that we are suppressing in order to protect us from it. However, this scanning process also means that we get even more occupied with the thought. Psychologists call this ironic rebounding. A biblical account in the Bible is given of a man called Job, who on experiencing a calamity said, "For the thing I greatly feared has come upon me, and what I dreaded has happened to me." Health psychologist and lecturer at Stanford University, Dr. Kelly McCoganall, in her book, The Willpower Instinct, suggests that instead of suppressing thoughts, one should let them come and go without acting on them. This process is called surfing the urge. If thoughts come to your mind that are against your values, do not feel bad about them or condemn yourself for having such thoughts in the first place. Just let them come and go without acting on them. As opposed to ironic rebounding, the option of surfing the urge reduces anxiety, and those who do this are much less likely to be obsessed with the thoughts they don't like. With this knowledge in mind, one understands even better why it is important to state and write down your goals in the positive. Your brain tends to give you more of what you focus on. The part of the brain responsible for this is called the reticular activating system, RAS. The RAS is a network of neurons located in the brainstem that are responsible for controlling sleep. A simple example of how this works is, if you intend to buy a specific car or have already bought it, you will suddenly notice the same car on the streets quite often. This does not mean that the sales of this car have suddenly shot up. It only means that because of your focus on it, the RAS scans the environment to confirm what you feed it with. If you watch the news on television every day or read it on the internet, you will realize that negative events are reported quite often, because that is what sells. The downside of this is that if you consume this kind of media, your perception is determined by what you focus on, which then determines your actions, which go on to determine your results. This is why two people can look at the same situation, and one sees no solution, while the other sees an opportunity. Am I suggesting you should never watch or read the news? That's a question you will have to answer for yourself. But think of these two facts. Firstly, most news is negative, and if we feed our minds with that kind of information 366 days a year, you can imagine what our RAS will lead us to focus on. Secondly, over 90% of what you read in the news does not affect you personally. If there is something very tragic happening around you or in the world that may affect you, you will find out anyway. If you want to make small changes, focus on behavior. But if you want to make big changes in your life, focus on changing your paradigm. This is exactly why, in writing your goals, you should be positive and specific. Do not focus on what you don't want, but rather focus on what you do want. Because as we have mentioned in the examples, our RAS directs our brain to get more of what we focus on by scanning the environment to lead us to events or things that confirm our perception. Use this powerful part of your brain to your advantage by focusing on what you want. The why is more important than the how. Most parents can relate to situations where they ask their children to tidy up their rooms. The children look at the mess that has accumulated over time and feel overwhelmed, swearing that it is impossible to do that in a day and therefore pleading to be given a week to finish the task. Tell the same children that if they did it in a day, they would get the bicycle they always wanted or go to Disneyland on the weekend. They would certainly muster the ability to miraculously find a way of tidying up the very room they had sworn was impossible to tidy just moments ago. It's the same task, but something has changed. I'll give you a second example involving an adult. I once had a colleague who was struggling with losing weight and swore to me that with his kind of schedule at work, there was no way to find time to work out regularly. He was totally convinced it was impossible. One day he experienced light chest pains, and his wife convinced him to see a doctor. He complied and set up a date to see the doctor. He was informed that if he did not cut down on his weight, he would not live long enough to attend his daughter's high school prom. This brutally frank news from the doctor made him shift his thinking. I can tell you for sure that even though his work schedule had not changed a single bit, he found a way of scheduling exercise in his daily routine and was able to reduce his weight to a healthy level. As a third example, I want you to imagine that a wide and thick wooden plank is placed on two pieces of square concrete blocks that are 30 meters apart. And you are asked to walk from one end of the plank to the other and be paid $50 for that. You will say to yourself, that's easily earned money. Why not? If the same plank is placed across two, say 300-foot tall buildings, and you are offered $1,000 to walk from one end to the other, you will most likely say no, for fear of falling. However, if your child or loved one is in one of the buildings and the building catches fire, and the only way to get there is by crossing the plank, you will most likely do it without thinking twice. Even if you are offered nothing in terms of money, you will put your fear aside and find a way of crossing over. These three examples have one thing in common. The task has not changed, but the why, which is more important than the how, has. If the why is very clear, it will motivate you to find the how. Looking at the example with my colleague, he had two whys: saving his life and being there for his daughter. These two reasons became so clear to him that he found ways to achieve a goal he had long thought impossible to achieve because of his schedule. When the why is clear, the determination becomes so strong that no obstacle that comes your way can stop you. You master every setback and find a way to go around it, or find an alternative route to avoid it. We often look at such people with this kind of determination and think that they have some special inborn talent, or that they are probably smarter than others. The truth is, they are not. They just have a clear why that propels their determination to achieve the goals that they desire to achieve. Sean Conlon, a very successful Irish-American entrepreneur and investor, once mentioned in an interview that his very modest upbringing, the memories of the little money they had, and the anxiety that came with it, pushed him to become the successful man he is today. He grew up in a small village in Ireland where they had a small house. Due to his parents' financial struggles, the bank threatened to repossess the house. That negative event was engraved in his memory, and he mentions that it made him swear that it would never again happen to him or anyone he cared about. He moved to America with only $500 in his pocket, but driven by the fear of being poor again, his why, he became a very successful entrepreneur. His why was and still is crystal clear, and that's why obstacles do not deter him. In 1998, an intense cyclone named Cyclone Phileo caused widespread flooding in Mozambique, leading to the deaths of over 100 people and destruction of property of unbelievable proportions. In the midst of this misery, there was an amazing story of a woman determined to stay alive no matter what. When the cyclone hit, she was at an advanced stage of pregnancy, and her village was one of the worst hit. As the water levels kept rising, she climbed on top of a high tree, determined to save her life and that of her unborn child. While on top of the tree, she went into labor and gave birth without assistance. She held on for dear life, and that of her newborn baby, and was rescued 2 days later by an army patrol boat, on top of the tree with a newly born baby for 2 days. Her why was so clear that she found a way, even though it seemed impossible to stay alive and be there for her baby. When your motivation, your why, is clear, no obstacle can stop you from achieving what you want. This woman truly confirmed that where there is a will, there is a way. Every action matters. I used to think that success comes after one special event or one genius idea that just pops up and leads to victory. A lot of people dream of the day when they will win the lottery and what they will do with the money. Most materially or spiritually successful people did not get to where they are because of a one-time event, but rather because their single, consistent, positive actions added up. In other words, the quality of your life as it is right now is the sum of your thoughts and actions over the past years or decades. We are creatures of habit, and our habits determine our actions and hence our results. If your daily habits contradict what you want to achieve, you will never reach your goals. A frog thrown into hot water will jump out immediately because of the immediate pain and consequent fear of death. However, experiments have shown that if the same frog is put into water with normal temperature that is slowly and gradually increased, the frog will not notice it and most likely end up dying. Our habits have the same effect on us. Let's assume your goal is to have an athletic body. Write down your goal and with excitement, start working on it. However, every week you binge on fast food, say 2 or 3 times a week. At first, you will not notice any changes, and your waist will not move an inch. You might not notice any changes, even in 1 or several months. At one point, however, the chickens will come to roost. The results of your habits will be presented to you, whether you like it or not. Eating a carrot instead of a cake full of sugar is easy to do, but it's also easy not to do. And that's what makes it tricky for most people. Making yourself some lunch at home for takeaway instead of going to a restaurant is easy to do, but also easy not to do. You may argue that the few dollars you spend for it will not break your bank. But then, multiplying that by 20 working days and then by 12 months will shock you at how much you spend for lunch. The actions you take every day add up and determine the quality of your life. This law of action and reaction works both ways, both negative and positive. Why it's so hard to break bad habits. One of the major reasons why our brains lead us to give up on goals, or the famous New Year resolutions, is that we don't see immediate results, and yet a part of our brain constantly seeks for rewards. This is a pleasure center that includes the amygdala that regulates emotions, the nucleus accumbens that is responsible for controlling the release of dopamine, the ventral tegmental area that is responsible for the actual release of dopamine, the pituitary gland that releases, among others, beta endorphins to decrease pain. Any activity, food, or object that immediately lights up this part of the brain will be registered by the brain as good and can lead to addiction. This explains why the following things are addictive to most people. Consuming processed sugar. This kind of sugar is converted into glucose immediately. Insulin levels spike up, and the brain cells convert the glucose to energy. You feel energized, but not for a long time. Social media. Studies show that the pleasure center that lights up when someone posts on social media and gets a like is the same one that lights up when someone takes illicit drugs. The like also has the immediate result of making one feel significant. Apart from that, wasting time on social media releases the stress of things like working on a complicated project or anything else that the brain considers stressful. Posting on Instagram subconsciously fulfills the need for approval and social acceptance. Spending beyond one's means. People spend money on things that they cannot afford in order to impress others, And this lights up the reward center because they feel significant even though they are destroying their future. They haven't learned through conditioning by their immediate environment and the media that having certain material possessions will cause others to think that they are rich and hence earn them respect. Others do it to impress members of the opposite sex, giving them the immediate pleasure of feeling loved. Smoking, taking drugs, or alcohol abuse. Although everyone knows that these activities are unhealthy, they meet certain needs that light up the brain's reward center. Smoking, for example, is a means of relieving stress. One can achieve the same goal by taking a walk in fresh air. Taking illicit drugs or drinking excessive alcohol helps one forget their problems for a while, hence reducing anxiety. Both these activities also help them meet the emotional need for connection with fellow human beings. Teens and young adults do this a lot to belong to the tribe and look cool, and the need for significance. There are, of course, many other examples, but even the few listed here show you why destructive, not goal-supportive habits are very hard to get rid of. They subconsciously fulfill different underlying immediate or short-term human needs. Yes, it may sound contradictory, but people hold on to bad habits because they meet certain emotional needs. The pleasure center of our brain is addictive to short-term or immediate reward. That's why it's easy to resist eating a carrot, but very hard to say no to a piece of cake. If you decide to save some money every month, you will not see the immediate effect on your buying power or net worth immediately. But if you spend money, you have the immediate reward of being praised by the friends or relatives you spend it on. The rewards for good habits in most cases take time to be manifested, whereas the results of bad habits are usually manifested in short term, but are of course hard to live with in the long term. One thing is clear, however, good habits are hard to form but easy to live with, whereas bad habits are easy to form but hard to live with. Break it down into chunks. With this in mind, what would keep us going in the process of achieving our goals is convincing our brain to connect these positive but hard to cultivate habits to pleasure. From my own experience, one of the ways to do this is to break down your major goals into sub-goals, and then focus solely on reaching these sub-goals. This will help you stay motivated for two reasons. One, you can live in the here and now, and that's what the brain tends to focus on. And two, every time you achieve a sub-goal, the pleasure center of your brain lights up, and you get the motivation to press on. In due time, your brain will form new neural pathways, connecting the habits that lead to these sub-goals to pleasure or the receiving of reward. Once the brain views a habit as a reward that meets an emotional need, the tendency of one repeating the same habit increases drastically because the brain automates it. For example, if your goal was to save $20,000 in a period of 5 years and your current salary is $2,500 a month, if you solely focus on the goal, your mind will reject it because it seems so far-fetched judging by your current monthly income. Thinking of the amounts all the time can also subconsciously lead to stress and anxiety. This does not mean you should give up the goal, but rather divide it into sub-goals and focus on the same. In the example above, since every year has 12 months, you multiply 12 times 5, which equals 60 months. If you divide 20,000 by 60, you get $333. If you divide this further by 4, the number of weeks, the amount is $83. From then on, your focus is on saving $83 weekly, an amount that your brain can accept much easier than the 20,000. At the end of every week, you achieve a mini goal and your brain's reward center lights up and you are motivated to go to the next step. Who you become versus what you achieve. I emphasized in the beginning how important it is to know what you want. Set goals, write them down, and start working on them. There is, however, a problem with focusing solely on goals. You are probably wondering whether I'm contradicting myself. No, I am not, and this is why. It has to do with how our brain functions, especially the reward center, and the effect of our self-image. Let us first look at the example of a little child who yearns for a certain gift, like a bike or a toy car. The parents promise to give it to the child as a present on his or her birthday, which is 3 months away. The child starts counting down the days, weeks, and months, really looking forward to that special day. The child tells all her friends about it and is really excited. Finally, the day arrives and the parents surely keep their promise. The child feels so elated at finally getting what he or she has been patiently waiting for. This happiness, however, only lasts a few weeks or months, till the child finds out that a friend or a schoolmate has a more modern bike or another shiny object that he or she does not have, and the cycle begins again. Adults are not immune to this kind of behavior. You write a job application to a company that you feel is your dream employer. You pray and hope that they will invite you for an interview and eventually hire you. After a few weeks, the letter of invitation comes and you are so happy about it that you feel like hugging the whole world. You look back and think to yourself, I have come a long way, and this is the reward of my hard work over the years. After the interview, you get the job and feel that this is the beginning of great times in your life. After some time, you find out from a friend about another company that pays better, and you think to yourself, I really want to apply for a job in this other company. I don't like the work conditions and the boss in my present company anyway. What is happening in these two examples? Why do we as humans act like this after achieving the goal we have been yearning for? This has to do with the following fact. The real purpose of the brain's reward center is not what we think it is, i.e., to guarantee happiness. The main purpose of the brain's reward center is to motivate us to act. Health psychologist Kelly McConaughey puts it this way in her book, The Willpower Instinct. Our brains mistake the promise of reward for a guarantee of happiness, and so we chase satisfaction from things that do not deliver. Of course, these things do not deliver, but we keep on repeating the cycle, hoping that they will. Guess who knows about this innate human weakness and uses it for profit? The advertising industry. In their commercials, they make sure they get your dopamine neurons fired up by making you imagine what you could do with the product they want you to buy and how happy you could be. Banks, wanting to make a profit out of your hard-earned money through interest by offering loans, lure you by making you imagine what exotic countries you could visit with their money or what good things you could buy. People fall into the trap, ignoring the fact that they will have to pay back the money with a lot of interest. You may be asking, are you now telling me not to set or go after goals? No, I am not. Goals are important, in fact, very important. Without goals, we would not be motivated to act. However, achieving goals is not a guarantee of happiness. If it was, all rich and successful people would be the happiest in the world. Many of them are not. That brings me to my final concluding point. I once had an acquaintance who just loved going for a run 3 times a week, no matter what the weather. Come rain, shine, or snow, he would put on his jogging shoes, dress up accordingly, and with a smile, go out jogging. I once asked him why he did that even if the weather was bad. His reply made me think. He said, because I am a runner. It was deeply ingrained in his self-image that he was a runner, and that's why it was easy for him to go out for a run, no matter what. There is a huge difference between someone going for a jog with the goal of participating in a marathon or a similar competition, and someone doing it because he is a runner. The former will most likely not maintain his jogging routine after achieving his goal, but the latter will keep on doing it because it's part of who he is. If honesty is part of your self-image, you will always tell the truth even when it's uncomfortable. If you have the self-image of an entrepreneur, you will keep on doing what an entrepreneur does even after reaching your goal of building a successful company, because that's who you are. If that's not a part of your self-image, you will most likely slack after reaching the goal. This is why who you become is more important than what you have or achieve. Certainly, achievement is great, but what will cause you to keep achieving the same goals and more is the kind of person you have become. Dr. Maxwell Maltz, one of the pioneers in the study of self-image, stressed in his book, Psycho-Cybernetics, that we will always act according to our self-image. We may temporarily act out of line with our self-image, but it acts like a rubber band that pulls us back within its confines. In other words, if your goal is to be a father, for example, ingrain the self-image of a father in you and own it. If you don't, your chances of being a good father are very low. Where there is a will, there is a way. There is indeed a way. Many of the things we see, use, and take for granted today were once deemed impossible, and some of those who invented them were even mocked. When Giuliano Marconi told his friends that he had found a way of sending sound waves through the air, they committed him to a psychiatric hospital because they thought he was crazy. He persisted, and that's why we have radio today. When Nelson Mandela sat in prison on Robben Island for 27 years, strongly believing in the end of the apartheid system and introduction of democracy and majority rule, many people never believed that day would come, but it did. Where there's a will, there is a way.